Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome aboard. I am doing this live stream at a UK EU friendly time. It is 6:30 in the evening here in London, and it's the first time I've gone live at a normal UK time. So, hi, everybody. I see everyone in the chat there. Clearwater Chad, Goldie. How's it going, Goldie? Olson 1987. Hello, welcome on board. Thank you for joining us. This week, obviously, Aaron Smith-Levin and Mark Headley and Claire Headley and Mike Grinder are all on a lovely cruise over in the Caribbean, which I'm not jealous about in the slightest. No, they're having a great time, but that means there's not going to be so much content from them this week unless they manage to do a live stream from the cruise. So I thought, what better opportunity to go and do a few more live streams and videos than I normally would, so that you guys can get a bit of your Scientology fix. So in today's video, what I thought I would do was start out by doing a bit of a ramble, talking a little bit about the topic I'm going to talk about, and then towards the end, give you guys the chance to jump on, questions and throwing anything at me that you want to ask, and we'll do super chats and that sort of stuff at the end. So to start off with, I think what I wanted to talk about was this thing called a life history. Now, when you join Scientology as a staff member, this isn't for someone who just wants to go and do services at Scientology at a church. They want to join and start doing a course. Like, this isn't applicable to you. This is only applicable to those who are joining staff. So if you volunteer to work at a class 5 org, like I did, like London org or New York or any of the sort of city level churches, there are lots of things you have to do in order to qualify for staff, including signing staff contracts and that sort of thing. So I thought I'd talk you through that process and show you some of the staff contracts and things you have to sign as a religious volunteer. And the main thing I wanted to start with was what's called a life history. Now, there's lots of talk out there about how and why Scientology gather data and information on you. And I think this life history thing is probably the most overt, kind of obvious way that they gather information on you when you're joining as a staff member. Now, this is obviously pitched to you as being covered by, religious, penitent, what do we call it? Privilege, priest, penitent privilege. So they kind of say, whatever you tell us in this stays in your folder. It doesn't get shared with anyone. It's protected information of a religious nature. So when you join staff, you kind of think, okay, yeah, fair enough. This is a church. I'm telling you all of my deepest, darkest secrets, but they're only doing that as a practice of, what should we call it? Like being honest with them, and also kind of showing you trust the church. I mean, in my mind, when I joined staff and I first did this, I remember initially thinking at the age of 16 or whatever I was, this is a bit weird. Like, why are they asking me all these questions? Well, I don't want to tell them my deepest, darkest secrets. But then also thinking, well, actually, by the time you get to this point, you've already agreed to join staff. So you're already in the headspace of staff being the most important thing you can do in your life. So your headspace goes to this place of like, well, obviously, this is a sign of trust. By telling the church this information, that's me showing that I trust them, and therefore they can trust me to do this really important job that they're going to get me to do. So this is where are we? Here we go. What's better? What's a better view? I think that one's a good one, right? So this is the life history. So this is an old version of the document. This isn't the most recent one that's up to date. However, it is all still the same questions. So I got sat in front of a computer in London org when I first started, when I first joined staff. signed my staff contract, and then sat down in front of a computer in the OSA office. The director of special affairs, Mark Pinchin, was the one that was kind of recruiting me, and he sat me down in his office and said, right, you need to fill this out in a form. And basically what it did is it asked me all these questions on the computer screen, and I just answered them on the computer. So obviously this is a printed out version, but it looks slightly different, but this is essentially, it's all the same questions. So the first question they ask you is, do you have any psychiatric or institutional history? Have you ever seen a social worker, psychologist, counselor of any kind? If you have seen any of the above for an interview, treatment, or any other reason, please give full details. Now, in Scientology, it's very clear, everyone knows that they're really not big fans of psychiatry. And the fact that they're asking this as your first question is just shows they want to understand, is this guy going to be a risk to us from a psychiatric point of view? Question two, have you ever been institutionalized in any type of psychiatric institution? Not only is this them trying to find out, are you some sort of risk? Are you connected in some way to psychiatrists? But are you someone that's going to potentially be a risk to us? Because we don't want someone joining staff that's got serious mental health issues and is going to need to be, sectioned or something and requires real medical intervention and help, right? We don't want that happening on our premises. Gives us a bad name. So is there any risk that you're going to cause us any major issue that could be bad for us in the press? Is basically what they're asking this question for. Question three, have you ever had a willing or unwilling connection to a squirrel group? Now, for those of you who don't know, in Scientology, there's this principle of squirrels, right? So in Scientology, the LRH policy in tech is meant to be unaltered and unchanged. What LRH says is meant to be followed exactly as it is written, exactly as it is written down in the book or in the policy, and not changed in any way. The only way of applying Scientology correctly is by doing it as the policy says, in or by or with the Church of Scientology, and not some splinter group. So a squirrel in Scientology terms is someone who takes the technology or the words or the policy and then, like a squirrel, takes it away and changes it slightly and makes it their own thing, and then applies it differently. So the idea would be independent Scientologists, the free zone, right? People who have splintered away from the main Scientology church and are applying Scientology in a different way, separate to how the church, the main body of the church, does. They are a squirrel group. So they're asking here, have you ever been a part of one of these groups, i.e. practice Scientology away from the church? Have you ever had a willing or unwilling connection to a suppressive group? Again, are you connected to any SPs, right? That's kind of a standard question you'd expect. But I think you also have to know, it says, if yes, please give full details. So all of these questions, this form isn't just a yes or no. It's a, if you have answered yes, tell us everything. Not just tell us a little bit, it's tell us everything about your connection to this group or whatever. Question 5. Are you or have you been connected to any person not in good standing with the Church of Scientology? If yes, names and connections. Now, this is where I would be in trouble because when I first joined staff, I obviously was qualified because I joined staff. I probably wouldn't qualify for staff now because I'd have to answer yes to this question. Have you ever been in not good standing with the church? Well, yeah, I'm currently not in good standing with the church. I am a declared potential trouble source, PTS type D. Bomb Cabadal, I do see your question. I'm going to answer that at the end, if that's okay. So please bear with me. So this life history is not just trying to gather dirt on you, but also trying to figure out, do you qualify for staff? Because if there are too many alarming occurrences, as the words they use in my declare, you would do this life history and they may say you're not qualified for staff. Question 6, have you ever not been in good standing with the Church of Scientology? So the first one is, are you or have you been connected to any person not in good standing? Question 6 is, have you ever not been in good standing with the church? If yes, give full details. Have you ever been declared a suppressive person by the church? Obviously, most people are going to say no to that. But if yes, give full details. Question 8, have you ever been connected to a squirrel or anyone connected to a squirrel group? Now, this is slightly different to the question they asked earlier. Where was it? Have you ever had a willing or unwilling connection to a squirrel group? And now it's asking, have you ever been connected to a squirrel or anyone connected to a squirrel group? So it's 1 degree back. It's not just saying, are you connected to a squirrel? It's, are you connected to someone who is connected to someone who is in a squirrel group? Which is kind of insane when you think about it, because when you think about degrees of separation and how everyone is kind of connected somehow to each other, are you connected to someone who is connected to someone who is part of a squirrel group? How are you meant to know that? If you had 1,000 friends on Facebook, 1,000 connections, how are you going to know if any of those 1,000 people have a connection to someone who is in it? It's insane, but nonetheless, they ask you this question. Question 9. Have you ever blown from the Sea Organisation? If yes, give full details. Now, for those of you who don't understand the word blown, that means leave unannounced, depart the Sea Organisation without prior authorization. 9A, have you ever had doubts about being Scientology and or the Sea Org? Now, what a loaded question, because anyone who has a sensible head on them is going to question things and think about things, and no one is ever going to be 100% fully in or out of any religious belief system ever, right? It's natural to have doubts and to wonder and to question things and to think about things. So naturally, there are going to be doubts at some point. Imagine you're in a really low place and you're really upset and you're really sad and you need a bit of a helping hand. And you're going to think, is Scientology really the best thing for me right now? Okay, maybe it is. It could be as simple as that, just a momentary, brief moment where you doubt it, but you'd have to write it in this form. So if yes, you have to give all your full details. Have you ever been offloaded from the Sea Organisation? That kind of means, have you ever just been sacked from the Sea Org? Have you ever been dismissed from staff of a Scientology org, mission or group, etc.? If yes, give full details. So if we use my example here of being declared PTS type D, I've already had to give them the story of me being declared PTS type D, because they've asked me, have you ever been in not being in good standing with the church? So I've already said yes, because I'm PTS type D. They're now asking a different question, which means I have to tell them the same story again. Have you ever been dismissed from staff? Well, yes, I was dismissed from staff because I was declared a potential trouble source. Type D. Have you ever blown from a Scientology organization? So this is asking, have you ever departed Scientology without prior authorization? Have you ever just woken up one day and thought, I'm not going into work today, I'm done, I'm fed up with this Scientology stuff, I'm not going in? Have you ever been expelled from the church? If yes, give specifics. So again, I've already told them this story, but I'm going to have to tell them again. Yes, I've been expelled from the church because I was a potential trouble source type D and I was kicked off staff. So that's the third time I've had to give them this story by answering this life history. Are you or have you ever been a newspaper reporter or journalist of any kind? Now, I think this might have created a bit of an issue for them when I first started on staff when I was a teenager, because I was at the time working as a journalist, but not a journalist that was working for a newspaper or anything that had anything to do with Scientology or the type of journalist they characterize or were particularly scared of. I was working in the fashion industry. So I was writing for a fashion magazine. I was a journalist in that sense, writing about fashion, about clothes, about models and parties and all this sort of stuff. It was quite glamorous. It was quite a nice life. But technically, I was a journalist. So I had to write, yes, I was a journalist. And I remember them pulling me into a room being like, so what do you mean you're a journalist? And I had to play it down massively, going, well, look, I know in your policies it says if you're a journalist, you're not allowed to be in the church in any way, shape, or form because you're hyper aware and scared a journalist is going to write a bad article about you. But I'm a journalist that writes about clothes and fashion and go to Paris for Fashion Week, and there's nothing to do with any sort of investigative journalism or news or anything. But I am still technically a journalist. So these questions just don't, I don't know, I think they're just too broad. They're not very specific when it comes to generalizations of things like journalists. Question 13. Are you immediately sorry, I'll start again. Are you intimately connected with persons such as marital or familial ties of known antagonism or mental or spiritual treatment or Scientology? If yes, give full details. There's a lot of things in there they want to know about you. Are you intimately connected with people of known antagonism or mental or spiritual treatment or Scientology? So they're asking, are you intimately connected to anyone who is against Scientology? Are you intimately connected to anyone who is anything to spiritual treatment or mental treatment or anything in that kind of new age, new world, yoga and spirituality type of thing? That would all fall into this category. Are you connected to anyone that has anything to do with those worlds? Do you have a criminal record? If yes, give full details. Which is a perfectly legitimate question to ask when hiring someone on staff, I think. I think it's not unusual to be asked that question when starting a new job. But so far, most of these questions are a bit strange if you're starting a new job. If you went to apply for a new job and they asked you these questions before you've even signed your contract, you'd kind of think, what is this? What is this group? 15. Have you ever threatened to sue or embarrass or attack Scientology or Scientologists, or ever been a party to an attack or a threat? If yes, give full details. So they're just outwardly asking you here, have you ever done this? Are you anti-Scientology? Have you ever been? Will you ever be? Question 16. Do you feel an auditor or Scientology book is responsible for any unwanted condition you are in? If yes, give full details. Question 17. Are you being audited on your own determinism? If no, give full details. This is basically asking you, are you being audited? Are you doing auditing because you want to, or are you only doing it because you have to, or because someone's told you you have to do it? They're asking here, they're trying to figure out, are you fully committed to Scientology? Are you fully committed to doing this? Question 18. Have you gotten gains which you expected from the Scientology training and processing you have received? If yes, if no, give full details. So it's now asking, do you believe? Not only are you fully committed, but do you believe in everything that's going on? Do you believe that it's working and Scientology helps people? Question 19. Do you have an open mind with no personal hopes or desires for auditing or knowingness? Now, this is an interesting one because having an open, and I remember again being not in trouble, but having conversations about this. Having an open mind is not a bad thing in general life, right? I think having an open mind is a good thing. If you have an open mind, that means you are open and accepting to multiple opinions and ideas, and you want to explore things before coming up with your own decision or your own mind about something. It's good to be open-minded. But in Scientology, being open-minded is considered being non-committal. In Scientology, if you're open-minded, that means you're kind of away with the fairies, and you'll just accept anything. You're just floating around, and you don't really have any clue what you're doing or any determinism. So when they ask this question, do you have an open mind with no personal hopes or desires for auditing or knowingness? What it's saying is, Are you just floating around in your own headspace and you don't really have any goals or kind of things you want to achieve? You're not really inspired to really achieve anything. You're just kind of doing it because why not? Which is different to what being open minded actually is. Do you feel anyone or anything can get better? This is basically asking, you know, are you of sound mind, and do you have any sort, if you were down in the dumps and feeling quite depressed or low or something and kind of at the end of your wit of with things, you'd probably say, no, I feel like everything's gone to shit and that's the end of it. This is basically asking, are you, depressed, basically. Have you ever sat in judgment on Scientology or Scientologists? If so, give full details. Again, this is trying to figure out if you've ever had any connection with any sort of lawsuits or had to judge anyone in Scientology. Have any of your family or close friends expressed skepticism or been critical of Scientology? Give full details. Again, it's just asking for more information about anyone who is potentially going to cause trouble for them. Have you been or are you connected to anyone who has threatened or attacked Scientology? If so, give complete details. So, if you are someone who has ever been connected to anyone who's had anything negative to say about Scientology, you have to tell them here. They don't care. They're not just talking about people like myself who've created videos on YouTube and speak publicly about Scientology. They're talking here. Have you been connected to anyone who's threatened or attacked Scientology? Give full details. Anyone that's expressed skepticism or been critical of Scientology. Oh yeah, when I spoke to my friend the other day about Scientology, he said, "Oh, well, I saw his documentary. Don't they believe in aliens?" And I said, "No, they don't. That's not what they believe." And he said, "Oh, okay, fine." Something as simple as that, you would have to write it here in this life history. They want full information. Have you ever taken LSD? If so, give full details. How many times, over what period of time? Have you ever taken angel dust, which is also known as PCP? If so, give full details of how many times, over what period of time. So these are um, drug screening questions. They want to know, have you had psychedelics, things that alter your mind or perception on things? Because in Scientology, they're so anti LSD and anti PCP that it's really important that you declare all of that. Have you had a full DRD, declaring and tested to a complete sweat out program? This is the drug rundown program. So this is, if you'd have answered yes to this, the LSD or angel dust, there is a rundown you can do in Scientology called the drug rundown. And the idea is that you sweat out the toxins and things left over from the drugs that you take. So it's basically asking you, have you ever done that? Have you ever dealt in selling illegal drugs? Have you ever dealt in any activity connected to illegal drug sales or distribution? If so, give full details. So in this question, they're asking here for you to give pretty intimate, private information. If you had a past where you were involved in this sort of thing, they're asking here for you to tell them everything. So if you were someone who got away with it and you hadn't been caught, they want you to give you all of the evidence there. They could potentially use this against you. Have you ever taken drugs since being in Scientology? If yes, state what drugs you took, what training and or processing you'd had prior, and what training or processing you have had since that time. When and where and under what circumstances you took the drugs. So it's not just what drugs have you taken. This is, tell us everything about what courses and things you'd done before, what auditing you'd had before you taking the drugs, where you were, what you were doing, why you took the drugs, what drugs it was. They want you to tell them everything about this incident. If you were someone who, for example, smoked weed, right, which is, in my opinion, not something too crazy, and you were someone that had a couple of smokes a week or something for the last 20 years, well, you're going to have to write down in this form every single time you've done that. Are you going to remember if you'd have smoked a joint 20 years ago? what the circumstance was, who you're with, why you did it, what processing you did before, and said, like, they want to know every single piece of information. It's insane. Have you ever threatened or attempted this word that we can't say on YouTube? Again, asking if you're going to be any sort of threat to Scientology, cause any issues in the press, and so on. Are you an active drug pusher? Are you related or connected to intelligence agencies, either by past history or immediate familial connections? If so, give full details. Which again is a stupid question. If you were someone who was a spy, you were MI5 or CIA or something, right? They're asking, are you a spy? Well, if you were, you're not going to say yes. Oh, yeah. And also, the whole idea of being a spy is it's so secret. And I don't believe if you're in MI5 or MI6, I don't believe you're allowed to tell your family. I believe there may be some exceptions. They're allowed to know you work for MI5, but not anything more than that. But there is a real close kind of tight-knit border on that, in that if, for example, I knew a family member was an MI5 agent, I certainly wouldn't be allowed to tell anyone else that this family member is an MI5 agent. So when they're asking here, are you related to anyone who is part of an intelligence agency? I wouldn't be allowed to tell them as per the Official Secrets Act. But what they do in Scientology when you're sat here doing this is they tell you that this is protected by penitent priest's privilege, because this is between you and the church. It's not going to be shared with anyone. They can't ever use it in a legal case or anything like that. It stays in a locked, sealed room that no one can ever witness, or they can never, see this document. Are you in Scientology to obtain news stories or generally disrupt the organization? Well, okay, this is just starting to get into city land now. Because say, for example, say this was true and you were in Scientology for news stories and you just wanted to cause a bit of a scene and disruption. Are you going to say yes to this question? Oh, actually, yeah, I'm 32 questions into this and I've lied all the way through this, because all I want to do is cause trouble for you, and I'm going to write a bad story about Scientology. And I've lied on every single one of these questions. But now you've actually asked me, am I here to obtain news stories and disrupt the organization? Now you ask, actually, yeah, I am. Yeah, you've caught me. Sorry, guys. This is just getting silly. Question 33. Now, this is where it steps away from Scientology and starts going into your personal life and your personal history and your personal relationships. Are you married, single, divorced, or separated? Give dates of marriage and divorce. If currently or ever married, give the full name of your spouse or ex-spouse. Does your spouse have any objection to your working in this organization or expressed any opinion against Dianetics or Scientology? What is your wife's maiden name? What is your relationship to your spouse and or ex-spouse? If you are divorced, where are we? What's your relationship? So yeah, if separated or divorced, any difficulties with your ex-spouse? Is your spouse or ex-spouse a Scientologist? If divorce, list reasons for your divorce and any emotional feeling you have about it. Do you have any children? What is your relationship with your children? If divorced or separated, do you pay child support? If divorced or separated, do you have any legal obligations or ties to your children? Have any of your children expressed any objections against Dianetics or Scientology, or have any objections to you working in connection with it? Give complete details. If your children are not with you, how do you feel about being separated from them? So they are trying to get all of your personal family information here about anything that could potentially come up. Poe on the go, I've just seen your message here. I've done criminal investigations that didn't go that deep. Dude, hi, by the way, thanks for coming in. This is insane. This is just the life history form you have to fill out to join staff, right? This is something I did when I first started in Scientology, and I was recruited on staff at Class 5 org at London org. Everyone that joins staff has to fill this out. So it's not just asking about your current situation with your family and your kids and your spouse, etc. It's asking, how do they feel about Scientology? Are they going to pose any sort of threat whatsoever to you being in the org? Has your mother expressed any objection against Dianetics or Scientology, or does she have any objection to you working in connection with it? In present time, does your mother express objection regarding Dianetics or Scientology to you? If yes, give full details. The same question for your father. List brothers and sisters and other relatives, the ones you have or have had association with. Note name, if Scientologist or not. What is his or her occupation? And current address. They're asking you here to give all of your family's details over. Where does your brother or sister live? What's their address? Well, why do they need to know this information? This is what I was thinking anyway when I first joined. Why on earth do they need to know where my brother lives? He's nothing to do with Scientology, never has been, never will be. You know, he doesn't work for the church. He's not. I'm applying to work for the church here. Why do you need to know my brother's address? But the reason is because they want to make sure they have everything they possibly can against you, should they ever need it. Have any of your relatives expressed any opinion against Dianetics or Scientology, or have any objection to your working in connection with it? If yes, give complete details. Have you any marital or family difficulties? If yes, give complete details. So they've asked you all these very specifics about Scientology and everyone's opinions and thoughts on that. But now they're asking anything not related to Scientology. Have you got any difficulties in your family with your wife or with your husband at all? 41. With whom do you live? Okay. 42. Do you support yourself currently? Food, rent, auditing, processing, etc. They're asking here, are you financially stable? Is someone else paying you for you to live, basically? 42A. Do you receive income other than that earned by the church? If yes, give full details. Again, they're asking here, they're trying to figure out what is a potential threat to the church. They want to understand who has control over you in your life. Because if you're someone that's financially stable and independent and you've got enough money to live, well, you're not that much of a threat to the church, because no one can swoop in and start exerting control over you because you're in control of your own finances. Whereas if you were heavily dependent on a parent or something who's paying for you because you're a teenager and they're giving you pocket money and that's what you're living off, well, if there ever becomes an issue where they're not totally into Scientology and they have a bit of an issue with you being in Scientology, well, they can threaten to, stop giving you money, and therefore your place in the church as a staff member is therefore at risk. So they're asking all this information so that they can paint a picture of you and who has control over you and your life, so that they can assess what the threat level is like. If you have your own business outside the church, do you also have other church staff employed in it? If yes, give details. Have any persons you are connected to expressed any opinion against Scientology or Dianetics? Or do they have any objection to you working in connection with it? If yes, give full details. 44. Have you or any of your family members or close friends ever been connected to a government agency? If yes, give full details. 45. How long have you been in Scientology? 46. Are there any cycles you would need to handle before being able to report for duty? So in Scientology, we're talking about things are handled in cycles from start to end to finish. One thing that people don't quite understand in Scientology is that a cycle is something that goes round and round, it repeats. But in Scientology, for some reason, we talk about cycles. If you are, there's a reg cycle. That's if you are trying to sell an auditing package to someone, it's called a cycle. And where are they at in the cycle? Well, you start the conversation, someone said, hey, you should buy this package. And then you're in the conversation where you're trying to sell it to them and they're kind of handling objections. Oh, I don't know, I've not got the money, whatever. And the end of the cycle is when that person buys the package, right, of auditing. So when it's asking here, are there any cycles you would need to handle before being able to report for duty? That's kind of saying, do you have any problems or anything at the moment that's stopping you from joining staff, right? So if you're currently moving house, you might want to finish moving house before you start on staff, right? Or, have you got to make sure that you've got childcare for your kid sorted out before you join? This is basically asking what's standing in the way of you joining staff right now. Do you have any debts? Who to and how much? Again, they're trying to figure out here who has control over you. Why did you join the Sea Org? Obviously, in my circumstance, this said staff because I joined the Church of Scientology in London as a staff member. So there is a staff version which asks all the same questions, and it's adapted. It's the same questions, but it says staff rather than Sea Org. I did later join the Sea Org, but never arrived. So why did you join staff or the Sea Org? What benefit will you be to the staff or the Sea Org, and what benefits will you gain from staff or the Sea Org? Now, that's just part one. Right? This life history thing comes in two parts. Part one and part two. Now, that's part one, which is just already pretty intrusive. Part two goes in even more depth, right? I think part one is very much all about who you are, give us context, what are the threats, who has control over you, who's got connections, who's connected to who. It's trying to paint a picture of the antagonistic side of things against Scientology. They want to know anything and everything about anyone who's a potential threat. Part two of the life history is where we start talking a bit more in depth about you personally, right? It's talking about training and processing. List in chronological order exactly what training you've done in Scientology. List by date of completion, month and year, for courses not complete, etc. Processing, same here. List in chronological order what processing you've had. And then we start looking at part three, which is where were you born, your education. List in chronological order, beginning with your earliest schooling, every school you've attended using headings illustrated below. Dates, name of school, location, and what you studied. Same with employment. It wants to know everyone and anyone that's ever employed you. Order all jobs you have held, beginning with your first job. Please explain what you were doing during any periods of unemployment. Medical history. Please list in chronological order any illnesses, accidents, permanent injury, etc. you've had from birth to present time by month and year. Include all childhood illnesses. For example, mumps, measles, chickenpox, etc. List the names and locations of any hospitals or sanitariums you've been in. State also the approximate pains during your life, with what time periods. List also any corrective surgery you've had and where done. Please list your parents' names and addresses. Please list your parents' present time occupations and other jobs they may have held. Give brief description of the type of work they did, the name of the corporation, etc. So they're not only asking for all of your work history, but your parents' work history. Why do they need to know that information? What's your attitude towards your parents, and what do you think of them? How do they regard you? Please list the name and addresses of your brothers and sisters. Now, this is where it really starts getting wild. List your friends, even prior to Scientology, and what sort of relations you had, what sort of jobs they held, and are they holding and they are holding now. Also, please state what your comms consisted of since being in Scientology. COM stands for communication. So they're asking, Please tell us everything about all of your friends and what sort of conversations you have with them since joining Scientology. What do they think of you? What do they think of Scientology? What's your friendship like with this person? In Scientology, we talk about dynamics. Life is split up into 8 dynamics. And the second dynamic is sex and love and relationships. Give a general 2D history, so second dynamic history for yourself, including your earliest sexual experience of any kind, when you started dating, and the names of all persons involved. Make a chronological list by month and year of the names of all the persons with whom you've had sexual relationships with and what you engaged in. Approximate the number of times you carried on in any kind of sexual activity and any perversions you engaged in. Who, what, how often, be as complete as you can. How many times have you had sex with this person? Have you ever done anything that's not just plain vanilla missionary sex? If the answer is yes, you've done anything other than that, you need to write it in here. This is where they're stopping. They've stopped looking at what threats exist towards the church, and now they're asking, what can we get about you that we can hold against you? They never exactly threaten using this against you, but the fact you've had to do this means in your head, you know that they have this information. So if you do ever want to leave, they may never threaten you with it, but you know that they have this information because you had to give it to them. So it's always in the back of your mind that they know all of this information about you. Note any instances of homosexual activity from earliest time up to present time. Give who, what, done, and how often. Again, this is because in Scientology, homosexuality is seen as bad, and they are the most anti-gay religious belief system that's out there. I'll do a whole nother video on that later. 12, list your interests and hobbies. List all groups and organizations you've ever been associated with, including time period, name of group, its locations, what type of group, and what you did in it. So I was once part of the French club at school when I was 6, and we stayed after school for an hour to learn French. Okay, well, that's a group I was involved with, so I had to write that in here. I was part of the debate club at school. Well, I have to write that in here. It's mad. They want to know all of this information. List any connections to terminals listed in the following groups. So again, this is just really flat out saying, do you have any connection with intelligence organizations, medicine, banking industry, psychiatry, the media, government, public relations firms? This is the most outwardly clear list of people Scientology don't like I've ever seen. They're basically asking, are you connected to any of the church's enemies? Have you ever been employed by a health clinic or institution? If yes, give all details. Have you ever been employed by the government? If yes, give all the details, and so on. And then we start going into part 4, which is how did you get into Scientology? Why are you in Scientology? Where did you first start on staff and why? Have you had any major ethics actions? And so on. Which isn't as exciting. It's as you would expect. Tell us everything about your journey in Scientology. Part 5, please list all the drugs you've ever taken. Please list any major commitments that you have, any financial irregularities, any theft of org funds, bonuses, and so on. And then please give exact details concerning your current life, whom you live with, whom you spend your free time with or run around with, etc. What is your daily routine? What do you do with your leisure time? And finally, please attest that the data is true and correct. So they end this with the final question, which is, thank you for telling us all that information. Now tell us absolutely everything else. Who do you spend your time with? What do you do with them? Who do you run around with? What do you do in your leisure time? They want to build a complete picture of everything that they can find out about you, because they're going to assess whether you're a threat to them. They're going to assess whether you qualify for staff, because not anyone can just walk in off the street and say, hey, I want to join staff. You have to qualify, and you have to be seen as ethically an okay sort of person. They don't want to hire anyone that could potentially cause any sort of problems for them or have any issues down the line, a PR flap or so on. So they ask you all these questions to try and establish who exactly you are and whether you can pose any sort of threat. Poe, I see your comment, and I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but that is quite funny. So that is the life history form that you have to fill out when joining staff, which concludes part 1 of this live stream. There is a part 2, but before we go and do that, let's just have a look at this super chat that we had. Bon Cabadal. Hello, thank you for your super chat. Hi, not a Scientologist, but if I did a personality test at Amsterdam as a lark somewhere circa 1990, colleagues did as well, turns out, was that info kept? Yes. The answer is yes. There is a policy in Scientology that says you never delete any sort of files or information about anybody. So whenever you do a personality test or anything like that, you have to give them your name, and whatever details you give them, they are put into what's called CF, central files, which every single org has. There's not a uniform central files. It's not quite digitized just yet. It is kind of, but it's not all linked on the internet. So if you're a public at London org, you'd have a central files here. You know, Birmingham org might not necessarily be able to look up your file at London org just yet, but I'm sure that capability will exist at some point. But every org you've ever had any sort of connection with will have a file on you with all the information they can possibly find about you in there. So if you did a personality test, then yes. But what that file will contain will probably just be your name and whatever information you put on the personality test about yourself and your results. There won't be anything else, because that's all the information they have on you. So get your questions in, guys. Please feel free to add some questions into the comments here about the life history. I am going to go into part 2, where we start looking at the contracts that are signed when you join staff at Scientology. But now's a good time to have a little quick break and drink some of my caffeine-free Diet Coke, which is in a gold can. Pearl on the go. Seriously, did you freely feel this out, or did you have concerns and did so under duress? So in order to join staff, you have to fill out your life history. You also have to do this life history thing when you join the Sea Org. So even if you've done it once already, you have to do it again when you join the Sea Organization. So yes, you freely have to do this. When I was joining staff the first time, you sign your contracts, and I was put in an office and said, cool, you have to do your life history. And I was kind of left on my own for ages just to do this. And I was like, it's really weird why they're asking me all these questions. I didn't get it. And I remember asking, why do you want to know who I've had sex with? I'm 16. Like, why do you need to know all this information? I don't understand. And they just explained it to me in that we're trusting you with a really important mission here, to have a really important job on staff, to deliver Scientology and to spread the word. And so we're trusting you with a lot here. So by filling this out, it's showing us that we can trust you and that you also trust us. It's a mutual respect thing. If you tell us all of your deepest, darkest secrets, then that means that you trust us, right? And it has to work both ways. So you have to do it to join staff. And if you refuse to do it, then they say, no problem, you can't join staff until you do it. So it's never duress in that if you don't do this, you're going to be, kicked out of the church or anything. It's just done in that, look, if you want to hold any sort of post of responsibility, we have to have this information on you. Broken dishes. Do they ever demand access to personal devices such as smartphones? Think of them installing location tracking, text captures, etc. Great question. As a staff member at a Class 5 org, no. You are completely free to do whatever you want. You are dissuaded from using things like social media, but it's your phone. You can do what you want with it, and you never have to hand it over. You do have to use your phone to call staff members, and you have to call public and all this sort of thing. You would text people using your own phone number, but there's never any requirement to give them access to your phone. However, in the Sea Org, it's different. In the Sea Org, there are very strict policies about having your own devices, and they are a lot stricter on it. And there are definitely instances of apps being installed on people's phones that track information and block internet access and so on. But that's not something that affected me as a Class 5 staff member. Alrighty, let's go into part 2. So this is the contract segment of the video. So when you join staff, having filled out this life history really long form that we've been through, you're also given a stack load of contracts to sign. They all look very, very similar, but they all have a very slightly different wording. And these are the same across the world, as far as I'm aware. These are certainly these are the exact forms that I filled out at the Church of Scientology in London. I remember filling them out, and they are identical. So the Church of Scientology of, and then you would write in there the name of, London or New York or whatever. So this is the agreement and general release regarding spiritual assistance. I, insert name here, recognize, acknowledge, and agree that I'm exclusively responsible for my present, future condition in life, and for the choices and decisions I make affecting my life. With that in mind, I solely and of my own volition and in independent exercise of my own free will am voluntarily signing this and submitting to the Church of Scientology of London, for example, and this agreement and general release, so that upon its acceptance by the church, I may participate in Scientology religious services. So this first point is basically just saying, look, I'm signing this to say I'm not doing this under duress. I'm aware that I'm responsible for my own decisions, and I'm signing this because I'm voluntarily asking to the Church of Scientology to give me to provide services. So this contract is my personal understanding concerning Scientology tenets and my statements reflecting my own beliefs and desires. By signing this contract, I recognize and acknowledge and agree that Scientology is a religion. The church is a Church of Scientology religion, and all the services and activities of Scientology religion are exclusively religious in nature. So by signing this is a contract you have to sign before you do any sort of services in Scientology. So you have to sign to say, yes, I publicly accept and believe Scientology is a religion. B. Scientology is unalterably opposed as a matter of religious belief to the practice of psychiatry and espouses as religious belief that the study of the mind, the healing of mentally caused ills should not be alienated from religion or condoned in non-religious fields. I am in full agreement with this religious belief. I do not believe in or subscribe to psychiatric labels for individuals. It is my strongly held religious belief that all mental problems are spiritual in nature and that there is no such thing as a mentally incompetent person, only those suffering from a spiritual upset of one kind or another dramatized by an individual. I reject all psychiatric labels and intend for this contract to clearly memorialize my desire to be helped exclusively through religious spiritual means and not through any form of psychiatric treatment, specifically including involuntary commitment based on so-called lack of competence. Under no circumstances at any time do I wish to be denied my right to care from members of my religion to the exclusion of psychiatric care or psychiatric directed care, regardless of what any psychiatrist, medical person, designated member of the state or family member may assert supposedly on my behalf. If circumstances should ever arise in which government, medical, or psychiatric officials or personnel or family members or friends attempt to compel or coerce or commit me for psychiatric evaluation, treatment, or hospitalization, I fully desire and fully expect that the church or Scientologists will intercede on my behalf to oppose such efforts and or extricate me from that predicament so my spiritual needs may be addressed in accordance with the tenets of the Scientology religion. Now, for those of you wondering, this contract is a direct result of what happened to Lisa McPherson in the 1990s. There is a whole separate video about this. There are plenty of videos online about Lisa McPherson, so go and look it up if you don't know already. But essentially, what they're doing here is getting you to sign something when you are of sound mind before anything ever happens, so that if you are ever in a situation where you've lost your mind and you need some sort of psychiatric care, or you're going through some trauma, they can provide this document to cover their backs and say, look, this person signed this with sound mind 20 years ago. So we have the legal ability here to step in and stop them from receiving the treatment they probably need. I'm not going to spend the next hour reading through every single word of this, but that first section here carries on with, look, the Scientology religion teaches that the spirit can be saved and that the spirit alone may save or heal the body. And the introspection rundown is intended to save the spirit. The introspection rundown is what Lisa McPherson was on when she sadly lost her life. I understand the introspection rundown is an intensive, rigorous religious service that includes being isolated from all sources of potential spiritual upset, including but not limited to family members, friends, or others with whom I might normally interact. As part of the introspection rundown, I specifically consent to church members being with me 24 hours a day at the direction of my case supervisor in accordance with the tenets and customs of Scientology religion. The case supervisor will determine the time period I will remain isolated according to the beliefs and practices of Scientology, and I acknowledge that this time may be uncertain, and so on. And then you have to sign up by going, look, I completely understand this and agree with it. Here's all my information, and signed. The next thing you sign is the Religious Services Enrolment Application, Agreement, and General Release, which is a little bit more general kind of, this is what you would consider your staff contract. I, so-and-so, Alexander, apostate Alex, acknowledge that I'm responsible for my own actions. I believe Scientology is a religion. This is where the word Scientology and Dianetics comes from. The founder of Scientology is L. Ron Hubbard, and the writings and spoken words are intended to help people. The term religious services are used in this contract. This is what Scientology is all about, talking about the grade chart, the bridge, and kind of, this is you saying you agree that they are parts of Scientology, and that's what makes up the religious beliefs of the church. Neither the church nor any other Scientology church or organization makes any claim that the nature or purpose of Scientology or words of LRH is contrary to what's stated in the contract, that the application of Scientology or Dianetics will have any particular effect on me or any particular person, and so on. So what this is doing here is this is saying that even though in Scientology, they may say that Scientology helps cure cancer or Scientology helps you live a better life, in this contract, you're signing something that says Scientology doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything about living a better life or curing you of anything or any of that nonsense. And that's just a personal belief. If anyone says anything like that, that's not Scientology. That's their personal belief. I've seen the film Orientation, which is a whole nother, we should do a whole nother video on that, but there's an orientation video for new staff members you have to watch, which is hilarious. This contract is my commitment that I desire to participate in Scientology religious services exclusively for spiritual purposes in accordance with the beliefs and practices of Scientology. Scientology religious services are designed to give spiritual aid, not medical treatment. However, the Scientology religion teaches that the spirit can be saved and the spirit alone may save or heal the body, and that Scientology religious services are intended to save the spirit. By signing this contract, I recognize, acknowledge, and agree that Scientology religious services are not intended and are not used for diagnosing ailments of the body or for engaging in the teaching or practices of medical arts or sciences. It's exclusively my responsibility to see to my physical or medical well-being, and under no circumstance does the church nor any other Scientology church organization may have any responsibility whatsoever in this regard. Which, might I just add, completely contradicts the last document we just signed that said Scientology will step in if you need sort of psychiatric treatment. See, I have not come to the church, nor do I seek to participate in Scientology just to be cured of any physical illness. While the registrar can assist me in arranging for a competent medical examination and appropriate treatment to be by a qualified medical practitioner, it is solely my responsibility to take whatever steps are necessary to demonstrate I have no diagnosable or medical treatable illnesses, ailments, or conditions, and so on. So this is saying that you agree completely that it's your responsibility to check your own health. I know that I should not participate in any Scientology religious service if I have any physical or mental condition which might be aggravated, or which might make my participation in the service uncomfortable or distressful to me. And I agree to accept and assume any and all known or unknown risk to injury, loss, or damage resulting from my choices and decisions in that regard. Scientology religious services may entail the use of a religious artifact known as the e-meter. I understand that by itself, the e-meter does nothing, but serves only as a guide to Scientology ministers to assist parishioners in locating areas of spiritual distress or travail, and that it is not intended or effective for the diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of any disease or for the improvement of health or any bodily function. This clause exists because L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology got in trouble once for claiming that the e-meter is what helps you get better and cures illnesses and so on. They got in trouble by the FDA in America. So now you have to sign something to say that, look, I agree that e-meter doesn't do anything. Scientology is unalterably opposed as a matter of religious belief to the practice of psychiatry. This is something that we saw in the last contract. It's just repeated, so I won't read it again. This contract memorializes my intention to participate in Scientology for the purpose of self-improvement and spiritual advancement. By signing this contract, I recognize and acknowledge and agree that achieving the benefits and goals of the Scientology religion requires my dedicated participation, because only through my own efforts can I achieve those benefits and goals. Before I go on to any further service, it is essential that I'm completely satisfied with my experience with my prior service. While Scientology holds out the possibility of a better life through adherence to its beliefs and practices, individual spiritual enhancement is not always an easy or comfortable task, and my success in Scientology ultimately depends on my own ability, strength, and determination to overcome the shortcomings and harmful patterns of my past. By agreeing to proceed with further services, I acknowledge complete satisfaction with all services I have participated in previously. No Scientology church is under any duty or obligation whatsoever to return any portion of any religious donation I make. However, I have read this policy directive, return of donations, and understand that under certain circumstances identified in published ecclesiastical policies, such as Scientology refund policy directive, a return of donations may be obtained through my strict compliance with those published policies and procedures, blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. Just for you, Goldie. I know how you like that. Blah, blah, blah. This is basically capturing your acceptance that when you request a refund, they're not going to give it to you. So you're signing something at the very beginning of your staff journey by saying, I understand Scientology doesn't give returns. They don't give refunds. And you're signing something here to say there are very, very specific circumstances in which they do, but I don't expect to get a refund. Basically is what you're saying with this particular document. In connection with my participation in Scientology religious services, the church may compile a folder containing its notations of my spiritual progress, known as a pre-clear folder or PC folder. So for those of you who don't know, when you have when you're doing Scientology services or auditing, you have something called a PC folder, which is where your counselor, your auditor writes notes based on what you say in your session and how the meter reads. It's kind of like if you were to go to a counseling session, your therapist or your counselor is going to write notes. Same sort of concept in Scientology, but it's called a PC folder, pre-clear, because if you haven't yet reached the stage of clear, you're known as a pre-clear. So what this is saying is I accept that you will keep a PC folder as well as other ecclesiastical files containing notations. All of my PC folders and other ecclesiastical files containing these, as well as contents thereof, are the sole and exclusive property of the Church of Scientology International. As a matter of religious belief and ecclesiastical doctrine and law, such folders and files and the contents of them are kept confidential from all persons who lack the authority to gain access to them, including me, and are subject to all applicable clergymen, penitent privileges, and are neither comprehensible nor meant to be understood by anyone whose training and expertise in their interpretation is not recognized and sanctioned by Church of Scientology International. So what it's saying is that it's not just someone writing notes here that this person's got daddy issues or whatever, you know, like Katie Lohman said in her interview with Andrew Gold. It will be notes of movements of the meter and so on that probably wouldn't make sense to someone who's not a trained auditor. As a condition of being accepted for participation, I forever abandon, surrender, waive, and relinquish without limitation any and all rights of ownership, possession, custody, control, access, copying, and viewing of my PC folder or folders, and all other ecclesiastical files containing any notions regarding my spiritual progress, both with respect to the folders and files themselves and the information contained in them. The abandonment, surrender, waiver, and relinquishment to which I refer in the immediately preceding subparagraph is unconditional and irrevocable, and applies equally to anyone acting or purporting to be acting on my behalf and for my benefit, whether I'm alive or dead, whether I'm disabled or incapacitated, and under any and all circumstances, foreseen and unforeseen, in perpetuity, without exception or limitation. So what I'm signing here is not changeable ever, regardless of what anyone ever says. Should I or anyone acting or purporting to be acting on my behalf or for my benefit ever seek access to any of my PC folders or any other ecclesiastical file containing any notions regarding my spiritual progress, I intend for the submission of this contract to be the presiding judicial officer to be a complete and sufficient basis for the immediate denial of whatever access is being sought with prejudice to any other or further effort to breach the absolute confidentiality of those materials or the exclusive right of the Church of Scientology International to preserve their absolute confidentiality. So this is saying that should you ever request your PC folder, you want to see what data the church has on you, you expect that this contract be presented as a reasonable excuse as to why they're going to say no. This contract goes on and on and on about all of these sorts of things. There is also a very specific thing about arbitration, which I'm going to do a whole different video on. I'm going to skip it for now because arbitration is very important at the moment based on the current court cases that are happening over in Scientology in the US and Australia. So I'm going to skip that just for now because I think it's a whole nother little wormhole we can go down. This contract is in good faith. I'm applying to participate in Scientology religious services to achieve betterment because I truly believe people can be helped. I'm applying honestly and in good faith. I have no record of being committed in an institution for mental or emotional disorders. I have no criminal record. I'm not connected to anyone who is antagonistic towards Scientology. I've never sued, embarrassed, attacked, or threatened to sue, embarrass, attack Scientology. I'm not attempting to investigate Scientology as a representative of the news media All of this stuff that's already been covered in your life history, you're now signing as a document as part of your staff contract. There is then a separate document which is just about your confidential religious files, which is much of the same, the PC folder stuff we just looked at, but it's a whole separate contract in and of itself that you have to sign. Then you have to sign a document that's all about the orientation film that you just watched. So the orientation film is something you have to watch when you start on staff, that tells you all about how Scientology works and the very basics of it, and what the purpose of staff is and so on. So you have to sign this document to say that you've watched this document, that you've watched this video. And then you have the application, declaration, and general release, declaration of religious commitment, application for membership in a Scientology religious order, and for active participation on church staff. This is the big beastie main staff contract. For those of you who've asked previously, how do they get away with not paying minimum wage? And how do they manage to get away with you working for free in a Church of Scientology? Well, this contract I'm about to show you answers that question, because you are signing this contract not as an employee, not as a someone that's expecting to be paid, but as a religious volunteer. Even if Scientology is not considered a charity here in the UK, you can still get away with being a religious volunteer because you're signing a declaration of religious commitment and application for membership in a Scientology religious order. I, apostate Alex, you put your address in here, apply for membership in a Scientology religious order within the Church of Scientology of London. You put the address here, 146 Queen Victoria Street. Hereinafter referred to as the church for a period of either 5 years or 2.5 years. Scientology staff members will either sign a 2.5 or 5 year contract. This is the contract. Information. If a minor, I've obtained consent of my parents. Your parents or guardians don't have to sign a contract, but you as a minor have to sign to say that you've got permission to sign, which is ridiculous. Number 2, I've never been convicted of the commission of any crime, felony under the laws of any jurisdiction. I have no institutional history of psychosis. I have no electric, insulin, or other shock or psychiatric brain operation history. I am not an active drug pusher. I have never sued the church or made any complaint to any government authority about the church. I'm not a blown staff member or blown SEALG member. That is, I have never, without authorization in accordance with church policies, departed from any staff position within any Scientology organization or broken my vow of service as a member of the SEALG, a religious order of the Church of Scientology. Or, if I have blown, but have since been recanted, have been given forgiveness and accepted back into Scientology. 8, I'm not related to or connected with any intelligence agency. 9, I do not have a parent or guardian that's antagonistic towards Scientology religion. This is probably the 5th or 6th time they've asked this question, right? They're really, really paranoid about you being connected to people who are against Scientology. But here you're actually signing a contract. You're actually signing a document to say, yes, legally, I'm declaring here that I do not have an antagonistic parent. I'm not seeking a staff position to obtain material for dissemination to the public via press, radio, television, motion picture, or other media. I do not seek to obtain data for any other organization or to disrupt the church. I do not have personal debts of magnitude that such that efforts. I will start that again. I do not have personal debts of a magnitude such that efforts to satisfy them would immediately disrupt or cause me to pull back from my commitment to the church. 12, I do not have any mental institution history. I have no prior service in a high security section of the government or armed forces. My spouse has no objections to me working on the church. I'm not currently on drugs. I've seen the orientation film. I attest I've been given and read Scientology policy directive 13th of March 96 statements by staff members. That's the one that we talked about earlier, where it says staff members may claim that Scientology helps heal this, that, and the other, and that's just a statement by that person, not representative of what the church actually believes. I understand and agree that by declaration, I am declaring a religious commitment to spiritual awareness, to the Scientology religion, and to create a better world in accordance with this declaration. Please initial. I further understand that all church staff members, including myself, are members of a religious order, that they serve pursuant to the religious obligations and not in contemplation of receiving any compensation whatsoever, and in doing so, that they are forsaking all commercial and financial motivation. Each considers him or herself a volunteer to create a better world and understands that he or she is not an employee, is not entitled to receive secular benefits such as a minimum wage or overtime compensation. Please initial. So that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the clause that allows them to get away with not paying you, because you are signing to say you believe you are a religious volunteer and you therefore forego any potential right to any sort of pay. It does say I understand and agree that my participation should be based on the following. You have so many hours of holiday and sick leave, which is complete nonsense because you don't get sick leave and you don't get holiday. The church does not provide a pension. You have to provide everything you need. Nevertheless, the church will, for example, give you a weekly nominal pocket money allowance, and for certain staff positions, room and board. The furnishing of these necessary items is not intended to be and is not compensation for services performed, but rather it provides an opportunity for the church to establish an appropriate environment which religious and spiritual awareness may receive the greatest prospect for enhancement, in which such matters constitute the sole reward of services. The amount of money you'll get each week will be dependent on the economic conditions within the church. As staff, you have to follow all the policy. If a staff member who receives services for no cost breaks his agreement, either by leaving staff, by completing his commitment, or by violating his good standing as a church Scientology staff member and is dismissed, he or she will remit forthwith to the church Scientology penance of violation, blah, blah, blah. You will be given a freeloader bill. The provision is not intended to reflect the traditional commercial bargains and concerns, but this is where it says here, you will receive a bill for any services you receive under Scientology for free when you're working as a staff member. Ethical conduct, you're expected to uphold a high degree of personal ethical conduct. The church is not obligated to honor any verbal promises that they make to you. During my service as a staff member, I agreed to not knowingly associate in any way with former parishioners of the church or any other Scientology organization who are either no longer in good standing or have been expelled or have been declared. General release. This is something that we've already signed 2 or 3 times before, but this goes into the real legal depth of basically covering their backside. I'm joining staff and becoming a member of a religious order of my own free will. I'm not doing it for monetary gain. I'm not doing it for auditing or training. I've been given the opportunity to consult with people of my choice to discuss questions regarding the declaration. I understand that this is a commitment of a formal religious vow to serve on staff for the entire period circled above. In accordance with church doctrine, I declare, and I have not gone past any word in this declaration I've not fully understood. And this is where you date it and sign it. Then it's countersigned at the end by the Church of Scientology. Wow. So that is it. That is the life history, and that is the staff contract you have to sign in order to become a Scientology religious volunteer at a Class 5 org. Thank you for bearing with me. I know it's been a long period of time of me talking through that, but that is the crux. That is everything that you're given when you join staff, and all of the documents you have to sign, and how you have to give them absolutely everything about yourself, about your family, about your friends, so that even if you leave, you know that they've got that information, even if they never threaten you with it, you know they've got their information on you. They also get you to sign so many documents that by the end of this day, where they finally got you to agree that you want to sign, you want to join staff, and it's the best thing you can ever do. It takes 3 bloody hours to do this whole process or more. And by the end of it, you're just like, yeah, whatever, I'll just sign anything. I'm just done. I'm bored now. I'm done. Please stop giving me documents to sign that all say the same thing. And if you don't sign every single one of these documents, they don't let you join staff. You have to sign all of these documents. And if you don't sign them, they will ask you why not and ask what you've done wrong. Anyway, let's have a little bit look at the chat, guys. Has anyone got any questions or want to ask me anything? I'm just catching up. There's been lots of chat I've missed. I'm sorry for missing a lot of this chat, but hello, everybody. I do think it's kind of wild. Jazzy J, is this something a person at 13, 14 would sign like Claire Headley? If so, what does a person of that age understand anything, as I'm 62 and can barely follow and think I'm of reasonable intelligence? Yes, 100%. This is, everyone would have to sign this. So yes, Claire Headley would have signed this as well. That's the thing, is they kind of make it so wordy and so all over the place that it is hard to follow. And by the end of it, you're just like, whatever, just stop. I'll just sign it because I'm a Scientologist. I believe in it and I trust you. And yeah, 100%. Amanda, Jesus. And I thought all the paperwork had to sign Jehovah's Witnesses a lot. Oh yeah, there's more. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. There is way more that I'm not showing you because I'm starting to bore myself reading through all of this stuff. And I've been on for 1 hour and 20 minutes already. So I don't want to bore you guys even more, but there's more. This is just the stuff that you sign to join staff at a class 5 city level Scientology org. If you join the C organization, there's more. There's also a non-disclosure agreement and a few other things that you sign that I haven't gone through today. They get you to sign a lot of stuff because they are so paranoid that you'll end up in some sort of lawsuit or legal situation for sure. How come the religion doesn't keep their end up? Why? Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. That's the thing. It does say in the staff agreement that you get holiday pay and sick pay. They will never do that. That never happens. Because if you're sick, you're PTS, you're connected to a suppressive person. Just reading through your chat. Are the 3 SPTV boys going to post anything soon while on their cruise? I think, as far as I'm aware, they're going to try to if they can. It just very much depends on whether they have the Wi-Fi and connection and everything they need for it. So we can hope, fingers crossed. But if not, you've got me. I'm here. I'll be streaming quite a lot this week. LRH, come back, Alex, and I will forgive you. LRH, as I've said historically, whoever runs this account is hilarious. I love this guy. LRH, thank you. You always put a smile on my face. For those of you who missed it yesterday, it was L. Ron Hubbard's birthday yesterday, March 13th. So it was quite a big one, a big day in the Scientology calendar. So we did a bit of a celebration. We're happy to have you, Alex. Thank you, Jazzy J. Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. And I hope you appreciate the earlier stream that's a bit more UK EU friendly. I will probably be on again a little bit later. So if you have any further questions for me, please think of them and use them later. I'm just going to answer this question. Hans Christian Schwartz, do you know of any happenstance where arbitration was tried in the UK? No. There's only a very small handful of UK instances where Scientology have ended up in court. One was against Bonnie Woods for harassment. Bonnie Woods was a US Scientologist who moved to the UK, and Scientology followed her and harassed her, and she took the church to court and won. She won the case against the church, and they lost and said that they were harassing her, and they issued a formal apology. Other than that, I'm not sure arbitration has been a thing here in the UK. Not yet, anyway. SD Cat Lover, thank you for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. Bok Buddy, thank you. Alex, sorry I missed the notification. No worries, man. Thank you for joining. We have been online for a little while, so I'm going to start wrapping up soon. Fabian, what do you think of self-help after your experience? Well, look, I don't have any issue with anyone that does anything to try and help themselves, right? Self-help, nothing wrong with it. If people, even with Scientology, right, there's always got to be a hook. There's always got to be something that lures people in. The very introductory early services and parts of Scientology do help people. If they didn't, no one would ever join. So there is limited benefit in that. I think there's no harm in doing something like reading a self-help book or applying some principles or whatever. The harm comes from the group who is using that in a coercive way. If it's a coercive control group and therefore has a negative impact, then that's a bad thing. But I have no issue with people trying to do something to, trying different things to try and live a better life. Yes, Mark, Tracy, and Stefania. Say hello to them. They are the London OSA people who will very likely be watching this. So say hello to Mark Pinchin, Tracy, and Stefania, the London OSA guys. Hi. How's it going? All right, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm going to head off now. And as I said, I will be back online a bit later. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your evenings, and I will catch you on the next one.